Please put any questions or issues you are having in the chat area and we will respond. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat area, which we will be monitoring throughout the session. The webinar is being live streamed on YouTube and Indonesian. You can scan the QR code, which is currently displayed on the screen, to access Nelnet International's YouTube channel. From there, you can access today's webinar. We will also be putting a link in the chat area to the YouTube channel, and the recording will be available for later viewing. Today's school children globally have been unable to study in classrooms and interact
Recording in progress.
in teachers, from their academic success to their social skills and mental health. COVID-19 has significantly affected today's children, their families, schools, and educators. According to UNESCO, school closures have affected approximately 1.6 billion students globally. This includes Indonesia, where schools are still mostly closed due to the pandemic, which is further complicated by its large and widely distributed population of students facing a range of connectivity and other issues. We need to make sure that we have the correct policies and tools in place to continue to deliver effective and efficient educational outcomes and prepare our children for the future. As our panelist, Fahmy, stated in the press release for this webinar, if educators cannot adapt to the situation caused by the pandemic, then our children will potentially be a lost generation. And that is something nobody wants to happen. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's panel, who will be providing their thoughts and insights on this very important topic. I would first like to introduce my co-host and friend, George. George is the national president of the Indonesian-Australian Business Council, chairman of the Australian Bilateral Committee for the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're also honored to have with us today Ambassador Legowo, the Republic of Indonesia's ambassador to Australia. We also have DeeAnn Wenger, President, Nelnet Business Services. Rebecca Hall, Commissioner for Victoria, Southeast Asia Victorian Government. Professor Suyanto, Rector, University of Amacom, Yogyakarta. And Fahmy, good to see you again. Always appreciate having you participate in our discussions. National Board Member, Nahdlatul Ulama, and Acting Chairman, Nahdlatul Ulama, Yogyakarta Province. And Mark Wiley, colleague and a former educator who has a wealth of knowledge and experience on issues facing today's school children. Now, I would like to turn it over to George. George, the Zoom floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. It's an honor again to be here with all of you. Obviously, my greetings to DeeAnn coming from Nebraska and Mark coming in from Chicago, to Professor Yanto, Mr. Fahmy Akbar Idries, and also Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Chris Legowo. The topic of today is a very important topic, as we are discussing the plight of our children during this massive impact of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and what the future lies for our children, and how technology and education technology solutions can provide a way out for everyone, children, parents, schools, and everyone involved in this particular, you might say, tragedy that is happening to the world and also happening to Indonesia in this matter. And for that, to open the session, Joe, shall I allow Ambassador Chris Legowo to lead?
Please.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. So we have with us the Ambassador of Indonesia in Australia, His Excellency Bapak Chris Legowo, or Pak Kristiarto S. Legowo. He is one of Indonesia's most senior and distinguished ambassadors and diplomat. He was the ambassador to the Philippines prior to becoming the ambassador to Australia, the Indonesian ambassador to Australia. And he was the Secretary General of the Indonesian Foreign Ministry, which is the highest level diplomat position in the Indonesian Foreign Ministry, outside of the Minister of Foreign Affairs herself. Ambassador Chris Legowo is a resident, or was born in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and also he is one of our most distinguished ambassadors in the world representing Indonesia. And now, another aspect that I would like to add is Ambassador Chris Legowo also escorted the establishment of the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that was ratified the 5th of July last year. And that is a very, very big agreement in the Indonesian landscape. So now I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Chris Legowo, obviously if he's already able to come in on this panel. Joe, I give the floor back to you to allow Ambassador Chris Legowo to come on in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak George. Is the ambassador on?
Yes, I think we need to allow him to come in on as a panel. Yeah.
So what we will do is, while that is happening and we sort out that technical difficulty, I will ask DeeAnn Wenger, who is president of Nelnet Business Services, to provide some opening remarks. So we'll go a little bit here out of order until the ambassador is able to come in. Let's one more quick check. Is the ambassador on the call? All right, DeeAnn, if that's okay, we'll just go a little bit out of order here.
Sure, that's fine. Good morning to everyone in Indonesia. I am DeeAnn Wenger, president of Nelnet Business Services. I would like to begin by thanking Ambassador Legowo in advance for participating in our second webinar regarding education in Indonesia. Nelnet partners with over 11,000 K-12 schools and 1,200 higher education institutions globally to help them embed best practices within their organizations. Our experience working with schools from early childhood education to senior secondary during some of the sector's most challenging times means that we are well placed to empower Indonesian schools to respond to the evolving education landscape, especially because of the impact of COVID-19. The future of our children is a topic of great importance. We all must work together to ensure that today's children receive the education they deserve, regardless of the current pandemic. Without a high-quality education, children will not thrive and be prepared for the future. We at Nelnet share Indonesia's vision and passion for K-12 education. Nelnet is excited to be a part of the conversation in Indonesia about the future of K-12 education and our children's learning and development more broadly. When entering a new country, Nelnet prides itself on acting local. Every country we enter is unique. It has its own culture and customers. The similarity we see is that we all want to provide the best education possible to its citizens. We are committed to Indonesia and investing the time and effort to build relationships with all of your education stakeholders and become a part of that community. As we have done in Australia, US, and over 50 other countries, we want to be a part of the dialogue with the Indonesian government schools, and other key stakeholders to help the education sector in Indonesia get through COVID-19 and continue to build for the future, whether it be through technology or sharing our experience and knowledge. I'm very excited to participate in the panel, and thank you for attending.
Thank you very much, DeeAnn. I'm going to hand it back to you, George.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And Ambassador Chris Lagoa is now here with us. Good morning or good noon, Ambassador. How are you, sir?
I believe the ambassador, there we go.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you so much, Pak Iwan. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Mrs. DeeAnn Wenger, President of Nelnet, Mrs. Rebecca Hall, Commissioner for Victoria, Southeast Asia, representing Victorian government. Yang saya hormati Pak Fahmy Akbar Idries, of the National Board Member of Nahdlatul Ulama. Yang saya hormati Profesor Dr. Suyanto, President of Amikom University, Mr. Mark Will, Executive Vice President of FACS International, Mr. Joseph Egan, Executive Vice President of Global Solution Nelnet International, distinguished webinar participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is really a great honor for me to join this important webinar as part of our strong commitment to find ways of better policies and initiatives for our children in the age of the global pandemic COVID-19. This webinar has come into fruition as a result of collaborative efforts between Nelnet International, State Government of Victoria, Indonesia Australia Business Council, Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Nahdlatul Ulama, the University of Amikom, and Association of Indonesian Higher Education Institutions, and of course, the institution that I'm representing in the Indonesian Embassy here in Canberra. For that, I would like to first and foremost thank these respective institutions for their outstanding collaboration to make this webinar possible. As been mentioned by Mrs. DeeAnn Wenger, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education system in the human history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 200 countries. Closures of schools, institutions, and other learning spaces have impacted more than 94% of the world's populations. We have lost, I could say we have lost 2020 academic year and even more in the coming future. The existing disruption has brought far-reaching changes in all aspects of education system. Like in many other countries in the world, the COVID-19 has forced 68 million, again, 68 million Indonesian students out of their classroom. Distant learning mechanisms such as online learning and educational television are in place to mitigate the effects of the school closures. During the global pandemic COVID-19, the Indonesian government has come up with many policies and alternative educational programs and activities in response to the pandemic, namely, among others, canceling the national examination, which has been replaced with the respective school assessment based on certain standards established by the Ministry of Education and Culture, granting full autonomy to school principals to use the school operational fund, or in Bahasa Indonesia, Bantuan Operasional Sekolah, to be utilized in accordance to respective schools, providing additional financial assistance total of $22.3 million to approximately 56,000 schools, providing cash assistance amounting to $258 million to more than 2 million non-civil servant teachers, lecturers, and education personnel, providing internet data packages to 35 million students teachers and lecturers to optimize the distance learning process. And of course, more importantly, to address the pandemic itself, providing vaccine to approximately 5.5 million teachers, lecturers, and educational personnel by the end of June 2021. To keep the students learning and studying at home, the government of Indonesia has developed also distant learning applications turned on Android, what we call Portal Rumah Belajar. The government has also collaborated with 7 online learning platforms, namely Smart Classes, Kuiper, Google Indonesia, Sekolahmu, Zenius, and Microsoft to smoothen the distant learning process. We should admit that there have been many challenges with regard to distant learning system in Indonesia during this global pandemic. Teachers have difficulties in managing the distant learning program. It must be acknowledged in this regard that there is a disparity, especially between teachers in urban areas who are relatively literate on distant learning compared to those living in the rural areas who have more limited internet access and lack of capacity with regard to online teaching. Limited internet access is still prevalent for those who are living in the rural areas. The absence of direct engagement and interaction in class has reduced the effectiveness of learning process. There's a common perception that during the pandemic that the understanding of students on subject has been declined also. To compensate the inability of teachers to managing online classes, they assign an overwhelming homework and school assignment. And the online class has unexpectedly led to the increase of the stress level of teachers, students, as well as their respective parents. I do understand that Australia has also experienced similar issues with Indonesia. The degree and the complexity of which Australia faces is far different from Indonesia. Despite its technology capacity and having more advanced in education system, Australia during this global pandemic still also need to deal with the negative impacts of online learning, some of which are very similar to the one that we have in Indonesia. Based on the above evidences, it is my view that in spite of its efficiency, flexibility, low cost, as well as of no significant issues with distance and times, the distant learning has limitations with regard to the lack of human interaction between teachers and students. And also it has weaknesses also in the observation and the potential loss of role model for students. Allow me to say that the purpose of national education, according to our law number 20 of 2003, are to develop the potential of students to become human beings who believe and fear of the God Almighty, to have noble character, healthy, healthy, knowledgeable, capable, creative, independent, and become a democratic and responsible citizen. In short, education is a learning process for individual or students in order to be a better human being. And I believe this cannot achieve only through an online education. Having an intelligent, knowledgeable, and skillful human resources is, of course, a great asset. However, having those high qualified human resources with negative character will only create greater liability. Indonesian people, for us, must be the true patriots who love their nation, their country, and also their homeland. So this is actually where the challenges lies. In an unconventional situation, such as the pandemic, our way of thinking about education also need to be unconventional. We need to find an appropriate balance between ensuring the safety of our health, but also finding inventive solutions to effective life in this new normal. Therefore, virtual engagement in education may very well have to step up a notch. We have to think about how we can simulate a learning environment as closely similar to a normal physical environment as possible. With technological advancement as has been developed today, I'm pretty sure that there are ways in which we can replicate a normal learning environment to support our children. So having said that, I do hope that through this webinar, we will be able to discuss the best and the most effective way to achieve that. So with that, I would like to wish you a productive discussion, and thank you so much for all the collaborations that made this webinar possible. May God bless us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Lugo. Your comments and insight on this matter is very, very insightful, and you've hit on exactly the particular issues that we are facing in regards to children, the schools, and the parents. And so we thank you, Ambassador, for your insight and for your availability to open this webinar. With that, Ambassador, I'll give the floor to you, Joe.
Thanks, Pak George. And Ambassador, I echo Pak George's comments. Your remarks were insightful, informative, and very helpful. You're right, we do need to take an unconventional approach during these unconventional times. And I was particularly struck by your comment that education is basically a lifelong learning process that allows all of us to become better humans. And I think we all be better off if more people took that to heart, particularly during these times. So thank you very much for those comments. And we are looking forward to being part of the discussion during these unconventional times. So again, thank you, sir. I would now like to introduce Commissioner Rebecca Hall to make some opening remarks as well. Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Joe, and to the organisers today. It's my absolute pleasure to be representing Victorian Government and to offer some opening remarks. Can I also acknowledge Pak George and his leadership on the Indonesia-Australia Business Council, and of course the Ambassador for his time and insights. It's fantastic if we think about technology and EdTech that we can come together today from various parts of the world and share our learnings, our policy approaches and our program initiatives around education and the future for our children. I was thinking as I was preparing some remarks for this that every one of us has been impacted in some way, whether our children are still in school, whether we're impacted by our team members or others who've been managing during COVID, or whether we're directly involved in policy changes and programming that is supporting education. I have actually had the pleasure to spend most of my career working in education, and when we see what we've been able to achieve during COVID and continue to achieve during COVID, whilst there are many areas that I'm sure we would like to change and improve, the sheer rate of change and the digital adoption has been absolutely phenomenal. I am an optimist, so I'm looking at this optimistically, but I also wanted to share, I guess, some of the challenges and also a bit of information today about Victoria and our role as Australia's education state and how much we value our partnership with Indonesia. And we see education and EdTech as a critical connector to our work moving forward. So it is a cliche, but the pandemic has changed many things, and the pandemic has transformed our education sector all the way from early learning to tertiary learning and workplace learning. And so this sudden shift has seen an adoption at levels that we could not have predicted around EdTech. I personally led EdTech initiatives for the Australian government for a number of years and other state governments, and to see the adoption and where we've been able to combine technology, combine expertise globally over the past 12 months has been phenomenal. Interestingly, saying that we're all impacted, we know that the pandemic has impacted our families. When I was looking at the title today, thinking about the future of our children, I also was thinking about the future of parenting and how we've been able to adopt and use technology in a positive way to support our children outside the classroom as well. And for some of us, how we've spent a lot more time with our children, seeing exactly what they're doing in terms of their learning environment and their learning experience. And I'm coming to you from an urban setting, and I know the challenges of working from home and caring for children and looking after our houses, our households. But I also think about our countries like Indonesia and Australia and remote learning, regional families and those families who don't have access to the same digital connectivity that we may take for granted. I was delighted earlier this year to take part in a series of interviews and discussions on the future of learning with a Victorian-based company, FutureLearn. And in that report, we discussed and uncovered the challenge of digital poverty. That even if we have the right systems and processes or access, how do we actually solve and tackle digital poverty so that we can, in fact, unlock the opportunity for every learner, and we can, in fact, open up diversity and diverse learning opportunities as well. And I know that this is highly relevant for both of our countries in terms of those students and families who we don't want to leave behind. We want technology, we want access to be able to lift them up and to offer and afford those same opportunities. I know there's been a lot of research, in action research, as we're going through the pandemic. And I know, Ambassador, you've noted some points there as well. But to know that a study according to SMERU, a research institute in Java, 30% of teachers are not teaching every day. And the proportion is even higher for teachers outside of Java, whereas many of 50% of teachers are not able to teach every day. That we're having to deliver education and learning in a way that is not optimal, but we're making the best with what we can do. So it really is, the onus is on us now as we enter or midway through 2021 and continue to navigate what COVID challenges present us, to ensure that we avoid further gaps in education, that we support our teachers and our administrators to be able to do the best with the tools and technology that they have, and that we ensure that we come out of this more equitable and increasing our ability to embed this technology in our way of learning. I wanted to also share with you a little bit about the Victorian EdTech landscape and our partners and friends at Nelnet. We consider you as a key part of that EdTech ecosystem. But it's something that I would say has probably been well hidden in terms of we refer to Victoria as the education state in Australia. We are the home to tech and digital skills and talent on a scale that is not available in other destinations in Australia. And when you combine both that, the education, the technology at a time like this, we really are keen to share that knowledge, keen to share that experience and engage with the world. And no partner is more important at the moment than our investment in Indonesia. I know a number of speakers have acknowledged IASEPA, introduced nearly 12 months ago, a huge amount of work gone into developing that partnership, and of course a massive opportunity ahead of us to realise the benefits and realise the opportunities through that partnership. And many of those are related to Industry 4.0, to cybersecurity, digital health, fintech, and ultimately though are connected to how we teach, the curriculum we deliver, and the graduates that we are producing every step of the way. So I think, I know it might sound cliche, but this is great timing to be part of this conversation. As the Victorian government, we're delighted to have a seat at the table, at the virtual table, and to continue to learn from Indonesia's experience and to partner with our exporters and successful tech companies like Nelnet and others to be able to bring education access and equality as a result of COVID. I think I'll leave it there. I know there's a lot more that I could say. I'm really passionate about education and passionate about the role that it can play in the Victoria-Indonesia partnership.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for those remarks, and a couple things that you touched on, which I think are often overlooked, and one of them is the digital poverty. We can all talk about remote learning, but if you're in a rural area and you don't have the capacity to get a laptop, or you're on 2G, where it might be in some places in Indonesia, it doesn't really help you. And so it really is overcoming that digital poverty. I also want to thank you and everyone at Global Victoria for your leadership. Your passion for education comes across. It's not just working with technology companies, but it is your passion for education. And very similar to the ambassador's comments, really trying to improve the lives of people in general and give them a better quality of life. So we thoroughly enjoy working with you and share your passion in education. So for that, thank you. Pak George, I will give the Zoom floor back to you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Commissioner Rebecca Hall from Global Victoria. Your insights are very, very insightful, and we thank Victoria because Victoria has played a major role, especially in education and innovation and technology in Indonesia. And it is one of the most leading and prominent states in this matter in Indonesia. So we thank you, Rebecca, Commissioner Rebecca. And now I would like to give the floor to H.E.Y. Fahmy Akbar Idries. He is a leader in one of Indonesia's largest social organizations. It's called Nahdlatul Ulama. It is a moderate progressive Islamic organization, and it also is one of the largest organizations with schools and universities, over thousands of schools and hundreds of universities and higher education institutions within the organization. And Mr. Fahmy is an old friend, good friend of mine. By profession, he's a banker, but in spiritual terms, he's an archbishop. So if you were to equate that in a, let's say, Catholic context. But Bapak Kiai Haji Akbar Idries, Pak Fahmy, may I give the floor to you, sir. Selamat siang, Assalamualaikum, Pak, warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Jos. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, distinguished guests, Bapak Dubes Indonesia untuk Australia, Bapak Kristiarto, host, Mr. Joseph, Pak Joseph, dan Pak Jos, all panelists, Ms. Rebecca Hall, Ibu DeeAnn, Bapak Wakil, dan Prof. Suyanto. All participants and all panelists. Allow me to speak in Indonesia, bahasa Indonesia, because my English is not good enough. And I think it's all participants is mostly Indonesian. I think it's like that. Okay, thank you. Bapak-bapak, Ibu sekalian, sebetulnya saya berharap saya bisa share screen kepada, tetapi karena tidak apa-apa. Ibu sekalian, NU adalah organisasi yang sangat besar dan memiliki banyak sekolah, baik elementary school, junior school maupun high school, termasuk perguruan tinggi. Ada beberapa hal yang menjadi concern kita dalam masa pandemi ini, yang kemudian kami di Nahdlatul Ulama kemudian mengalami beberapa masalah apa yang disampaikan oleh Pak Dubes dengan Ibu Rebecca tadi sangat benar sekali. Itu yang kita alami di Indonesia, khususnya di Jogja, di mana ada pembelajaran yang shocking, kaget mereka, kemudian terjadi learning loss bahkan karena kemudian ada perubahan metode yang kemudian itu mengharuskan pemerintah maupun masyarakat dalam hal ini guru dan siswa itu kemudian harus melakukan adaptasi dan itu sangat tidak mudah. Beberapa hal yang kemudian menjadi problem di lingkungan NU khususnya di Yogyakarta adalah mereka mengalami shock karena pandemi, penyakit yang luar biasa, ada kelambatan adaptasi, ada something semacam tantangan baru, persis seperti yang tadi disampaikan oleh Ibu Rebecca, bahwa tiba-tiba guru kemudian memberi tugas yang sangat banyak, tetapi kemampuan mereka beradaptasi yang sangat lemah, sehingga kemudian ada beberapa hal yang diajarkan, yang disampaikan kepada siswa, kemudian menjadi tidak mengena, tidak tepat sasaran. Sehingga apabila ini berlangsung terus-menerus, kami sangat khawatir mereka ketika lulus sekolah, ketika selesai sekolah, mereka tidak tahu apa-apa. Saya bahkan agak ekstrim membuat istilah namanya lost generation. Ini sangat mengerikan sekali. Karena apa? Ada sedikit studi di internal NU, khususnya di Jogja, perubahan pola belajar dari fisik kemudian menjadi online, di mana kemudian anak-anak hari ini demikian sering menggunakan gadget atau laptop. Di satu sisi mereka melakukan adaptasi teknologi, tetapi di sisi yang lain juga memberikan dampak negatif. Apa dampak negatif kita hari ini? Dalam waktu-waktu luang, anak-anak kita kemudian mereka bermain game online. Sehingga kadangkala lebih banyak waktu bermain game daripada belajar. Sehingga beberapa waktu yang lalu di Indonesia bahkan sudah ada petisi kepada Kementerian Informasi supaya melakukan pemutusan hubungan game online. Karena apa? Karena ada perubahan gaya ketika belajar menggunakan gadget, setelah itu kemudian pada saat luang mereka kemudian menggunakan itu untuk game. Dan ini bahkan justru lebih bahasanya nyandu, candu, kecanduan, ketagihan. Nah, jadi kami melihat ada 3 permasalahan serius, terutama untuk high school ke bawah. Pertama adalah banyak alat-alat di sekolah vokasi semacam SMK kejuruan itu kemudian menjadi wasted, menjadi tidak terpakai secara kontinu, sehingga banyak alat-alat yang juga rusak. Kemudian pembiasaan karakter di lingkungan anak-anak, terutama di elementary school sama junior school, seperti berdoa di pagi hari, menyanyikan lagu-lagu kebangsaan, kemudian perilaku antri, kemudian saling menolong, itu kemudian terkikis secara perlahan, sehingga ada shifting karakter di dalam proses pembelajaran ini. Dan munculnya hari ini kecanduan siswa-siswa terhadap game-game online itu juga cukup membahayakan, karena kemudian muncul aplikasi-aplikasi yang tidak pantas untuk anak-anak kecil, tidak pantas untuk anak-anak yang berumur di bawah 15 tahun. Sehingga mereka mendapatkan cerita-cerita, bahkan berita-berita ataupun video-video yang tidak pantas. Nah, secara umum kemudian terjadi penurunan memori. Bagi kami yang di Nahdlatul Ulama, sekolah-sekolah yang ada di pondok pesantren, yang kemudian mereka tidak masuk kelas, kebiasaan untuk menghafal, seperti menghafal Al-Quran, membaca kitab-kitab, terjadi penurunan waktu, sehingga interaksi itu kemudian akan menjadi sangat penting sebetulnya. Tetapi ini tidak terjadi. Karena itu ada ketidak-match tidak kesesuaian antara bagaimana kurikulum yang disampaikan dengan apa yang dihasilkan. Hafalan-hafalan terhadap Al-Quran dan Al-Hadis kemudian tidak terstimulan. Biasanya kami waktu kecil di pondok pesantren mendengar kawan-kawan membaca surat-surat di dalam Al-Quran sehingga secara tidak langsung saya ikut menghafalkan. Tetapi karena ini tidak terjadi, maka kemudian hafalan saya menjadi sangat rendah. Hasil hafalan saya menjadi sangat rendah. Sehingga hal ini juga menurunkan pembentukan sifat religiusitas serta secara ideologis menjadi kurang sempurna. Butuh waktu untuk kemudian kita melakukan adaptasi sampai kepada posisi awal. Disinilah kami kemudian mencoba melihat sebetulnya bagaimana reaksi orang tua terhadap proses pembelajaran online seperti ini. Para orang tua seperti yang disampaikan oleh Pak Duta Besar tadi merasa kemudian ini lebih mahal, lebih boros karena mereka harus menyiapkan kuota untuk online yang alhamdulillah pemerintah sudah memberikan subsidinya. Itu kemudian orang tua yang tadinya tidak memiliki, terutama kami yang di kampung-kampung tidak memerlukan smartphone sehingga sekarang harus membeli smartphone, ini menumbuhkan biaya baru. Kemudian para orang guru itu juga merasa lebih banyak waktu karena kesulitan untuk melakukan pengawasan bagaimana hasil belajar itu kemudian guru harus secara one by one melakukan evaluasi. Para orang tua dan guru merasa model pembelajaran online juga merusak mata. Mereka harus fokus kepada laptop dalam waktu berjam-jam atau bahkan ke gadget yang kecil sehingga mereka kemudian terganggu kesehatannya. Bahkan dalam beberapa hal guru hanya memberikan tugas sehingga orang tua menganggap seakan-akan guru tidak memberikan pelajaran apa-apa. Hanya memberikan tugas yang itu belakangan kemudian dianggap membuat orang tua juga ikut sibuk. Bahkan ada orang tua yang beranggapan harusnya kami tidak perlu membayar sekolah. Karena apa? Karena kami tidak berangkat ke sekolah, kira-kira seperti itu. Karena menganggap guru itu tidak bekerja, menganggap sekolahan tidak memberikan fasilitas full terhadap proses pembelajaran itu. Nah, orang tua juga mengeluh bahwa anak-anak itu kemudian sekarang kecanduan, ketagihan bermain gadget, bermain handphone. Ini sangat mengerikan atau orang tua kemudian sangat prihatin, sangat concern terhadap hal-hal seperti ini. Bagaimana anak-anak itu melihat situasi seperti ini? Studi kami secara observasi kami mengatakan bahwa anak-anak juga merasa tugas too much, terlalu banyak. Membuat lelah, bahkan mereka yang seharusnya bersekolah hanya sampai siang kemudian merasa harus bersekolah sampai malam, bahkan mungkin gurunya juga jadwalnya tidak bagus. Kemudian anak-anak merasa daya serapnya itu menurun, tidak mengerti apa yang disampaikan oleh guru, merasa tidak bisa bertanya, tidak bisa berdiskusi, mereka bosan betul, bahkan beberapa anak mengatakan terlalu sering di rumah orang tua marah. Karena mungkin orang tua tidak mampu menjadi seorang pengajar yang baik, seorang guru yang baik. Karena memang tidak memiliki latar belakang seorang guru. Sehingga seringkali orang tua itu juga marah. Dan anak-anak merasa sangat under pressure terkait dengan itu. Nah, akibatnya tentu saja kondisi-kondisi yang ekstrim ini memerlukan beberapa perubahan. Persis yang disampaikan oleh Pak Duta Besar sama Ibu Rebecca tadi, bahwa banyak guru di kampung-kampung yang tidak literasi teknologinya, miskin teknologi itu memang terjadi. Apalagi bagi orang tua yang kemudian tidak berada di rumah karena bekerja di luar tempat, sangat itu cukup menyulitkan. Seperti Ibu Bapak tahu, para panelis dan juga para partisipan, dan juga yang sedang menonton secara streaming melalui channel Nahnu TV, itu Indonesia banyak tempat yang secara sinyal itu sangat lemah. sehingga kadang bisa lancar, kadang tidak, dan itu di daerah-daerah yang gunung itu menjadi sangat kesulitan, bahkan sometimes mereka tidak bisa online. Ini juga membuat mereka tertekan. Bagi orang tua hal itu juga menambah beban baru, karena kalau orang tuanya dua-duanya mereka bekerja, maka kemudian pengawasan terhadap anak-anak menjadi lemah. Ini memberikan beberapa akibat yang tidak baik di masyarakat. Karena itu webinar ini kita berharap mendapatkan masukan dari para ahli-ahli pendidikan, bagaimana platform pendidikan yang bagus, sehingga ketika online itu bisa diakses dengan baik, meskipun pemerintah waktu itu juga melalui national television, tapi juga tidak terlalu sukses, kemudian sinyal yang kuat, apalagi internet gratis misalnya, kemudian standar-standar yang kemudian itu membuat siswa kita menjadi lebih enak dalam belajar. Tentu saja tidak boleh ketinggalan adalah asistensi maupun mentoring kepada guru supaya mereka juga lebih terliterasi secara teknologi. Dengan demikian maka kebutuhan kita, persiapan kita untuk menghadapi masa pandemi yang sampai hari ini kita tidak tahu kapan akan berakhir, kemudian ini akan menjadi lebih baik di masa-masa yang akan datang. Pengalaman dari Victoria atau dari tempat-tempat lain akan sangat kami butuhkan di Indonesia supaya terjadi dialog, terjadi diskusi, hingga kami di Indonesia bisa melakukan perubahan-perubahan untuk melakukan agar pendidikan kita menjadi lebih baik di masa-masa yang akan datang. Saya kira demikian Pak Jos, waktunya. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Fahmy. Thank you Pak Fahmy for those insights. So what Pak Fahmy has shared basically is the background in Indonesia, what in reality children, parents, and schools are facing due to this pandemic, and expects that there are solutions coming out of this webinar and this dialogue that could be presented as a way or a solution to face these challenges. And I'd like to welcome also, Pak Fahmy just shared with us, this webinar is also now live streamed in Nahdlatul Ulama TV, which Pak Fahmy just facilitated that live stream. So thank you, Pak Fahmy. Welcome our friends, para Nahdliyin and Nahdlatul Ulama TV, who are joining us via live stream. Thank you. And now we have, with your permission, Joe, I would like to introduce Professor Muhammad Suyanto. He is a leading educator in Indonesia. He is a legend in Indonesian education because he started from scratch an education institution to now becoming one of the leading education institutions and technology-based education institutions in Indonesia that are basically in Indonesia also supporting schools and campuses in terms of their technology needs. So with that, Professor Suyanto, whom is always creative, as he is one of the most creative educators in Indonesia, I give the floor, the Zoom floor to you, and I believe you're a co-host, Professor, if you wanted to share your screen. Please go ahead. Prof, you need to unmute, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Pak Jos. His Excellency Ambassador of Indonesia to Australia, Pak Kristiarto S, Commissioner Rebecca Hall, DeeAnn Wenger, Mark Weil, and Joseph Egan. Thank you. I would like to share my PowerPoint. Today I would like to talk about the future education in the age of COVID alchemy. I think very interesting. My name M. Suyanto, Su mean good, Yanto smart and handsome. So Suyanto good, smart and handsome. And I would like today I would like to talk about technology, particularly in animation. COVID-19 pushes the world to a crisis. Crisis is turning point. In Chinese language, Wei-Ji, Wei is a threat, Ji is opportunity. And Fahmy said, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. So God's words, verily, hardship, there is ease. I think very interesting. I try opportunity. This is future education. Crisis is turning point. We try to turn from current education to future education. I think very interesting. According to Inayat Khan, the current way learning emphasizes intellectual dimension is big mistakes. It is sentimental or dimension or spiritual dimension. Inayat Khan said that's the most important. In process education, the sentimental cannot be separated from the intellectual dimension. We taught the farmer the sentimental dimension or spiritual dimension, there will be the death of heroism, idealism, and soul. So, Inayat Khan stated that ancient myths, science, psychology got inside a spiritual dimension, the world knowledge that he called alchemy. Yeah. In simple sense, alchemy is process of turning iron to gold. Many people seek alchemy to gain gold to lead life. I think very interesting. Maybe Pak Jos. This is our platform or Inayat Khan platforms. God creates spirit and body become soul. So we have spirit, soul, and body. God inside is sentimental dimension or spiritual dimension, and body intellectual dimension. We try psychology as bridgings, intellectual dimension and sentimental dimension. So entering the gate of alchemy, the future education our children K-12 school must be emphasis on the ability of feeling, empathizing, serving, and being sincere. I think it's very important for the future of our children. And quote of Winston Churchill, we make a living by what we get, but we make life by what we give. I think it's very interesting and very important for the future education. And this is our approach. It is too hard to educate our children K-12 school in COVID-19 with sentimental dimension, with its very philosophical. We have best way to overcome the difficulty that is to say educating our children K-12 school through ICT, I think, particularly animated film. We have this approach from culture. from religion, story, design, production, branding, channeling, and value. I would like to show animated film. We have more 40 international work, but this is a trailer, November 10.
Professor Suyanto, it appears that the video has stopped. Is there more of it to play?
Okay, I think that's all, Pak Jos, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, Pak Jo, I think that's all. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you,
Assalamualaikum
Professor.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Professor Yanto. And again, that's a very creative approach, how animation can be a solution for our
Okay,
teaching and
Pak Jo.
learning. Yeah. Oh,
My
okay.
dear mother,
All
I've
right.
been assigned to the north. Don't know whether I'll make it back or not. Take care, mother.
My beloved son, Daddy will be home soon. We will go together to the night festival.
And every night I'll cry till I'm blue and say the happiness that you bring. If only there were no war.
The world would be in peace. There would be no loss. No more tears. Only happiness and love.
Thank you, Pak Jos, and I think that's all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor. Walaikum salam. And that is a very unique approach towards teaching and learning now, using animation as a way to provide a solution for engaging with students and education providers. So thank you, Professor. Terima kasih, Prof.
You're welcome, Pak Jos.
Thank you, Professor. And now I'd like to give the floor back to you, Joe, but I also like to recognize some people coming around from all over the world, including Professor Thomas Novak, the Hungarian Attaché, Education and Science Attaché in the Hungarian Embassy in Washington, D.C. So welcome, Professor. Thank you. But Joseph, I give the floor back to you, sir.
Thank you, Pak George. And Professor Suyanto, thank you very much for showing us that video. I think that does demonstrate, different ways of educating our children. I'd like to bring Mark Wall into this discussion. Mark is my colleague here at Nelnet International, but I think more important to that, Mark has a wealth of knowledge and information, not only being on the technical side, but Mark is a former educator. So he brings that unique perspective and really understands what the schools, the teachers and families really are going through. So first, Mark, welcome today.
Thank you, Pak Joseph. I appreciate this opportunity. It's honestly a privilege to be a part of such a distinguished panel as this, and just thrilled to be able to lend my voice in this important conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. We've heard a lot of insightful information that, just forms the building blocks for starting to work on a solution. The ambassador talked about thinking unconventionally in how we approach this. Commissioner Hall spoke about digital poverty, which I think is something that is often overlooked. We've heard that theme running through here in Indonesia, where we can have the best technology ever, but if you can't access it, it's useless. Pak Fahmy was talking about a lost generation and issues going with teaching. And I'll say this, kids probably being kids saying, we're going to play video games and doing some homework there. And then Professor Suyanto made a great comment that there's threats and opportunity. When we show the slide, we really need to change. What direction are we going to go into? Because when you think about it, the method of educating kids hasn't changed in 200 years easily. You go to a school, there's a blackboard, there's a teacher, you learn, you go home, you repeat. Now that we can't go to school, what are we going to do here? Just some of your experience, Mark. We were talking this the other day, really about, are there some best practices or what can be done to help out the school children, just not in Indonesia, but globally, tackle this issue utilizing EdTech and technology?
Thank you. The roll up to that question, I mean, when you start thinking about the impacts and the remedies that are needed in order to bring forward what we might call a full school modernization, is a major lift. And to be fair, and I want to applaud the nation of Indonesia and all these bright minds that are working shoulder to shoulder to understand the issue and accept the realities of impact, and really be thoughtful about both the near term and the long term in terms of remedies. I think the one thing that I just want to say right at the beginning of my response is that and I think this has come out in many of the comments that we've shared this evening, is the imperative that we have collectively as a globe to take care of our children. Now, I live in a community, and I have seen during the pandemic children running free. There's more children riding bicycles and doing things than I've ever seen in my life. I think, you know, in their world, they have enjoyed the fact that, wow, they haven't had to be in school every day as they might normally have been. But we know that this is having a serious effect on children. And the effect is not just the academic delay in their learning, which is serious as it is, but also take into the account that we have families that are falling into poverty at a protracted rate. 140 million children globally that have fallen into economic poverty as families as a result of COVID. So that's a shocking number, which is another casualty. And I do want to speak to the digital poverty issue just for a moment as well. Almost nearly 500 million students, that's 1 in 3 children learners on planet Earth, have been unable to access remote learning during COVID. Even if countries were doing a spectacular job at providing a seamless transition, we have nearly 500 million students that have been unable to access that opportunity for remote learning. So, you know, the climb is really steep here, and it begs the question, how can we tackle this issue? And there are some absolutes that we're grappling with. Number one is infrastructure. We have to have infrastructure. And unfortunately, we're fighting this battle too late in many nations globally. So when we assemble a remedy that involves educational leaders and business leaders and government, that is the only way that we're really going to be able to substantially lay the framework for the infrastructure that is needed. If you look at the United States, for example, you know, by good fortune, you know, many schools were already embracing student information systems. Some of those, like the fax system, for example, already has a learning management solution inherent in it. So that transition was made possible by the fact that the infrastructure was there. So we have to double down on the imperative to embed the infrastructure. But as has already been pointed out this evening, we have a lot of educators who are delayed in their understanding of how to create a learning experience and deliver instruction through a remote environment. But I will say this, and I hope this is a challenge that nations take on, and certainly this is something that Indonesians can consider, is that we talk about the remedy to this being remote, being able to provide a learning management environment that allows for remote learning, which is critical. If we look at the fact that in this early decade of 21 years, we've had 5 pandemics already, compared to only 3 in the whole 100 years prior in the previous century. So we're facing not an if, but when are there going to be more of these interruptions to learning. So we need the distance learning. But I'll just say this, I think that we have an opportunity, and some of the most innovative schools that we see on the planet are embracing distance learning, not as a proximity of school to home only, in cases where schools have to close down and students are quarantined at home, but that we can embody a new style of learning that is still remote, but it may be students that are on campuses, and some of the most innovative schools are embracing the model of having students be able to learn in more of not just a borderless school, but borderless classrooms and be able to interact with one another in an engaging learning environment and with their instructor, who doesn't necessarily have to be in their physical presence at that time. So there's a lot of room for innovation here. And I think the key is just getting started. We have to put one foot in front of the other, and we will get there. But it is a steep climb, and we have to have solidarity of resource and solidarity of minds in order to figure that out.
Thanks, Mark. If any of the panelists have any comments they want to add, please feel free to do so. If any of those participating, I'm watching this on one of the various sources out there, please feel free to enter the question. Commissioner Hall has been kind enough to post a link in the chat area on the Future of Learning report. Please feel free to download that. Couple of other themes we heard here. Mark, the ambassador talked about, education is a lifelong process to being a good human. Ambassador, I'm going to be using that going forward. I think that's just a wonderful comment and sentiment. Professor Suyanto talked a little bit about, education and empathy and everything that, Fahmy spoke about. One of the benefits of in-person education is you have that interaction, that creativity, teaching children, empathy, compassion, in addition to, what they're supposed to be learning. How can we help teachers, help children, work in that creative part of the children, the social part of the children when you're learning remotely? So you might be in a room by yourself at home. What are some things that you're hearing out there, or some advice from your experience that, can really help children become creative and not lose that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly this is a new experience for educators, and it's a new experience for children. They're just not used to being in an environment where they can't look to their left or right and see their peers and be able to have breaks and go to recess with them and so forth. But I think that the only way for us to really re-energize our children, and I know that this runs contrary to a wave of emotion that we hear from families around the globe. I mean, clearly it's been challenging for families to figure out how do they now participate as actively as is demanded of them to be involved in the daily learning of their child. It's a lot to ask, but I've always thought about this in terms of the fact that when you take that young mind and you say, who are the fiduciaries that are responsible for their growth? And we're not just talking about academic growth, but to the points that have been made, the spiritual growth, the values, and the culture. Who's responsible for, who are the fiduciaries? And the parents have to be at the top of that apex. So I hope that as families think about the need to keep their children engaged and inspired, that they will cross the aisle in their communities and bring their children together in whatever way is safe and reasonable, and find ways to develop learning clusters within their own communities at times when that can't happen at the school. I think it calls for that kind of creativity, and in all of these settings and nations, we have teachers that are emulating the absolute best practices with providing instruction remotely. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to find who those individuals are. We need to be talking more about what their skill sets are, and we need to be emulating those across the landscape of education. It's going to change the landscape of our teachers and instructors in our schools. There are some that are just going to bow out and say, this is not for me, I can't do this. But there's a whole new generation of instructors that are coming online, and our universities are going to be helping them, obviously, have the kind of credentials that they need to be able to pivot quickly and provide the learning that's needed. So there's a lift here that's at the K-12 level, but there's a lift at the university level too, as we commission our universities to rethink teacher training and equip them effectively to be able to do those quick pivots that we're going to need.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm hopeful that the unconventional thinking becomes conventional, right? So no one thinks it's so-called outside the box. If I think about my children, I'm here in Melbourne, Australia, but Indonesia is pretty close to us, 274 million people, great trading partner. We've talked about AECPA. If they want to learn Indonesia Bahasa, do they take it in a course, or can they just participate virtually in a classroom in Indonesia? What's going to be better for them? Well, the latter is to be able to do that and immerse yourself into that. And I think there is a wealth of opportunity that can help our children. But globally, again, we've heard a few times about digital poverty. You might not be able to send your child overseas or to certain schools which offer certain programs. But if you can do it from your home and log in and take courses in Australia, the United States, South America, Japan, Indonesia, anywhere, I think that has the potential to provide a much richer education for our students if people start thinking that way. And so getting back to Professor Suyanto's slide there, I'm hoping we all take, I think it was a right to go towards opportunities and focus on that and move away, as Fahmy said, from all the negative stuff that is going on here. How can we turn this horrific pandemic into an opportunity for our children, because we do not want them to be a lost generation, and we want to make sure we're preparing them with the tools necessary, as we heard from the ambassador, to become productive members of society and generally good humans. Does anyone have any questions? I think that there's one coming in from Rebecca. If someone has a question, feel free to ask the panel.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much, everyone, for those presentations. Fantastic to hear the insights and the experience. I have a question around who funds. We have finite resources in order to respond to COVID in our education settings. One of my observations is, though, we've unlocked partnerships in a way that we haven't done so before, and you're not having to sell the idea of online learning or the fact that we should invest in digital. It's a given. But I'm just interested in the panel members' comments on what might have changed in terms of funding and partnership, and what the future might look like around that in terms of who's responsible and how we will fund continuing innovation in this space.
Excellent. Would anyone like to start off answering Commissioner Hall's questions? An interesting perspective, because the partnerships are not just government, but the business sector as well. Is there anyone that would like to address that?
Maybe Pak Fahmy or Professor, from an Indonesian perspective. The question is, bagaimana, let me speak in Indonesian, bagaimana pembiayaan pendidikan saat ini di Indonesia dalam konteks penyelenggaraan sekolah? Apakah kondisinya mengalami stabil atau kesulitan, atau bagaimana dari pengalaman Bapak-Bapak, Prof. Yanto dan Pak Fahmy dari Nahdlatul Ulama? Kami persilakan.
Oke, mohon izin Pak Jos, saya dulu. Ibu Rebecca, thank you for your DM for me, and saya kira peluang-peluang kemitraan ke depan itu sangat besar, untuk sangat tinggi. Saya sangat senang karena itu berarti untuk inovasi di bidang proses pembelajaran, termasuk pemanfaatan teknologi informasi. Dan tentu saja kami sangat gembira karena kita membutuhkan masukan dari para ahli, siapapun dia, untuk bagaimana meningkatkan kualitas pembelajaran. Karena seperti tadi saya sampaikan, hari ini Nahdlatul Ulama adalah ormas terbesar di Indonesia dengan jumlah jumlah simpatisan itu sekitar 100 juta. Kami memiliki ribuan sekolah di seluruh Indonesia, ratusan perguruan tinggi. Di Jogja saja kami memiliki lebih dari 26 sekolah atas, 127 atau 37 sekolah menengah atas sampai kemudian di level elementary school SD. Sehingga kami membutuhkan betul masukan-masukan dari para ahli bagaimana sebetulnya kita memperbaiki kualitas atau proses belajar mengajar ke depan. Ketika kita sampai hari ini tidak mampu mengetahui kapan pandemi ini akan berakhir. Saya pendapat dengan Pak Mak tadi bahwa ke depan suka atau tidak suka, mau kita tetap harus berkreatif, berinovasi. Karena apa? Ya karena pandemi harus kita terima. Kita harus bersahabat dengan pandemi yang saat ini sudah terjadi. Demikian Pak Jos, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Fahmy. Pak Prof Yanto mau menambahkan dari perspektif Indonesia. Prof Yanto, would you like to give an addition to the Indonesian perspective? All right, I think Prof Yanto probably dropped off. Okay, so Joe, that's probably from Fahmy, obviously. You know. Oh, sorry.
Hold on a second. I think Professor
Yeah.
Suyanto was on mute.
Okay, go ahead, Prof. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. Our experience, our university experience, pandemic makes our university and economy 2 times profit. If I say profit 2 times, I think it's big opportunity. Pandemic make me collaboration with Hollywood and collaboration with Silicon Valley. I think it's very interesting. So this is, I think, I say opportunity. We have a threat, but we have opportunity, big opportunity. I think it's our experience. Thank you, Bajos.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Suyanto. And Commissioner Hall, I'll just add, as coming from the private sector, from a company that specializes in education, and our mission is to help the education-seeking families achieve their goals. The public-private partnerships have never been more important. It's an overused term, but we are all in this together, right? So we all need to work together. I keep going back to Pak Fahmy's comment about we do not want to have a lost generation of students. So we have to collaborate, we have to work together, we have to be innovative to deliver services. And we have found that everybody is willing to enter into those types of relationships. We've been very successful to work with governments in different countries, particularly here in Australia with you all, and then working with the Indonesian government. You know, everyone is, if you will, rowing in that same direction, but those partnerships have never been more important. I think we all learn from each other too, and certain barriers that might have existed previously are no longer there. So that's my comment to that. We are bumping up against our allotted time. I don't know if anyone, before I make concluding remarks, has anything they want to say. I'll ask the panelists one more time. Is anything they want to say?
Yes, okay, Mr. Joseph. About teaching, I think we try to make our children lose your ego and find your compassion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I am going to conclude this webinar. This does not conclude the discussion. This is the second in a series of several discussions that we'll be having on how the public sector and private sector can all work together and collaborate to improve the quality of education for our children. So I would like to thank all of our panelists for today's stimulating and thought-provoking discussions. Your insights were absolutely incredible. What's great about these discussions, no matter whether in the public or private, everybody is passionate about helping our children. We find that, a fantastic first step on the road to coming up with a solution. So I applaud everybody for that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this as well. So I'd like to thank the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia here in Canberra, especially Ambassador Legowo. Can't thank you enough for participating in this. That was very kind of you. And we look forward to continued discussion with you. The Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Indonesian Australian Business Council, Global Victoria, the University of Amacom, Nahdlatul Ulama, for their generous support. And again, all of the panelists here, thank you so much for participating today. Great discussion. My contact details are on the screen. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. We will soon be announcing additional education-related forums so we can continue this discussion with everyone. And we look forward to your ongoing support and involvement. Thank you all very much, everyone, and stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ambassador, Rebecca, DeeAnn, Mark, Professor Yanto, Fahmy, Joe, Phil, and Mike. Thank you, everyone.
That went great, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Phil. Thank you.
Cheers.
See you.
James, thank you, James.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Well done. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Joe, DeeAnn, Mark.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.